The fires of war had been lit, and the shadow of Dracula's wrath stretched across Wallachia like a suffocating storm. Season 2 of Castlevania opens not with a battle, but with a council of monsters. A war council. Dracula's castle, a shifting fortress of stone and magic, stands as the dark heart of this rising empire of death. Inside its walls, gathered around a table carved of obsidian, the generals of the night convene. Here, the audience is introduced to the fractured loyalties and rivalries that will drive the conflict to come. Dracula, gaunt and grim, presides with a quiet fury. He is no longer the charming aristocrat of old, but a man hollowed by grief, consumed by hatred of mankind after the execution of his beloved wife, Lisa. His war is not conquest, it is extermination. The generals assemble, ancient vampires from across the world, each with their own ambitions. Yet Dracula makes a choice that shocks them all. Instead of entrusting the campaign to one of his seasoned generals, he places his faith in two humans, Hector and Isaac, forge masters, men who, through a dark alchemy, can create creatures from the corpses of the dead. This decision ripples through the room like a poisoned dagger. Why humans? Why trust them over vampires who had waged wars for centuries? Hector and Isaac may be loyal to Dracula, but they are despised by the generals. To the proud vampires, the idea that frail mortals could command them is intolerable. And yet, Dracula stands by his decree. For Hector and Isaac share his vision in a way the vampires do not. They see mankind not as prey, but as a curse-flawed, selfish, corrupt. They believe in Dracula's mission of annihilation, not for power, not for wealth, but for cleansing. And that loyalty, that belief, is worth more than vampire blood. But tension boils. And into this discord steps Carmilla, the last general to arrive, late, but with purpose. A vampire of ambition and cunning, Carmilla sees Dracula's grief-stricken crusade for what it is, a weakness to be exploited. With venom veiled beneath a smile, she begins weaving threads of doubt. Why wage war like this? Why scatter forces across Wallachia instead of striking with precision? Why let humans sit at the head of armies when vampires thirst for command? Carmilla questions Dracula's sanity, but carefully, never directly. She sows seeds, planting them in the minds of those who already resent their lord's choices. The War Council fractures. What was meant to be a unifying moment becomes the first sign of disintegration. Meanwhile, beyond the castle walls, our heroes make their way through a ravaged countryside. Trevor Belmont, the last son of a disgraced house of monster hunters, travels with Sypha, the speaker magician, and Alucard, the damper son of Dracula. Their quest is monumental: to stop Dracula before his war eradicates humanity. Trevor, hardened by years of exile, wears his cynicism like armor. But Sypha's warmth and optimism begin to pierce that shell. She sees hope where Trevor sees only death. And Alucard, burdened by the weight of betraying his father, embodies the tragic heart of the struggle, half human, half vampire, torn between love and duty. The trio's journey takes them along dangerous paths, through villages already emptied by Dracula's forces, into ruins haunted by the fear of what's to come. Their destination, the Belmont estate. Long abandoned after the family's excommunication and slaughter, it may hold secrets powerful enough to turn the tide of war. But their travels are shadowed by danger. Carmilla has begun to set her schemes in motion. To her, Dracula is not a leader, but an obstacle. His grief makes him weak, and his war is destined to collapse under its own weight. Yet where Dracula sees vengeance, Carmilla sees opportunity, the chance to reshape the vampire world under her own command. Her presence at the War Council is a spark, and already, the flames of treachery begin to spread. As Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard reach the outskirts of the Belmont estate, the narrative shifts, pulling us into the darkness of their pasts. Trevor returns to the home he was forced to abandon, haunted by memories of persecution and loss. The Belmonts were hunters, feared by both monsters and men, accused of witchcraft and heresy by the very people they sought to protect. Now, only ruins remain, a legacy buried in dust and ashes. Yet within these ruins lie weapons, knowledge, and artifacts collected over generations. Tools forged in the fires of necessity, designed to battle creatures of the night. It is here that the trio hopes to uncover a way to defeat Dracula. The arrival at the estate is not only practical, it is deeply personal. For Trevor, it is a confrontation with his bloodline, with the shame of exile and the weight of responsibility. For Sypha, it is a glimpse into the world of the Belmonts, a family of warriors whose lives were dedicated to the same mission she now embraces. And for Alucard, it is a reminder that though he carries the blood of Dracula, he also shares in humanity's fight for survival. Meanwhile, back in the castle, the seeds of betrayal continue to grow. The vampire generals whisper, question, doubt. Carmilla's voice rises among them, her influence spreading. She questions why Dracula sits brooding, isolated, barely engaged in the very war he has unleashed. Does he even care about victory? Or is his only desire destruction? Her words resonate, and her true plan begins to take shape. If Dracula cannot lead, then perhaps he should be replaced. By the end of these 2 episodes, the stage is set. On one side, Dracula's forces stand divided, loyalty fraying, betrayal looming. On the other, Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard step into the past, into the secrets of the Belmont estate, where hidden power may give them the strength to stand against the darkness. The war has not yet begun in full, but already the cracks are showing. In Dracula's grief, in Carmilla's ambition, in the fragile alliance of our heroes. And as the shadows lengthen, the promise of bloodshed grows ever closer. The storm of war deepens, and with it, the shadows spread. In shadow battles, the story tightens its grip, pulling us into the heart of schemes and betrayals, where battles are waged not only with swords and sorcery, but with manipulation, deception, and words whispered in the dark. At the center of it all, Carmilla. She is no ordinary vampire general. Unlike the others, who hunger for conquest and blood, Carmilla hungers for control. She sees Dracula not as a god-king to be obeyed, but as a broken man adrift in his grief. His war is not conquest, she says, it is suicide. Why should the vampire race tie its future to a madman's mourning? She begins to weave her web. She speaks not of loyalty, but of survival. She paints Dracula as weak, unfit to lead. And slowly, she turns all eyes into co-conspirators. Some listen out of fear, others out of ambition. But all sense the truth in her words. The Empire of Night may soon collapse unless new hands seize the reins. While the politics of the castle turn ever more poisonous, our heroes press forward into the ruins of Trevor Belmont's childhood home. The Belmont Hold, a vast underground repository hidden beneath the estate, filled with the accumulated knowledge and weaponry of generations. A labyrinth of relics, tomes, and instruments of war against the supernatural. For Trevor, this is a return to the bones of his legacy. Walking among the dust and relics, he sees the lives of his ancestors etched into every wall. His family was exiled, branded heretics, their works condemned. Yet here lies proof of their devotion to the protection of mankind. For Sypha, the Belmont Hold is a wonder. Every book is a world. Every artifact a story. To her, it is not merely a vault, but a cathedral of history, one that hums with the voices of the past. And for Alucard, it is revelation. Though he shares his father's blood, here he learns the depth of human ingenuity in the face of monsters. The Belmonts did not wield armies of demons or castles that fly across the land. They had only their minds, their will, and their craft. And with those, they stood against the night. Within the hold, Trevor and his companions find more than weapons. They find hope. Hope that this long war, stacked so heavily in Dracula's favor, might still be fought. But hope is fragile, and across Wallachia, the war rages on. Dracula's forces descend on towns and villages, leaving trails of fire and bone. The Forge Masters, Hector and Isaac, walk very different paths. Hector is gentle in comparison to the monsters he serves. He hates cruelty, and though he shapes demons from corpses, he does so with the strange innocence of a craftsman. To him, it is creation, not destruction. His loyalty to Dracula stems from a shared dream of purging the corruption of humanity. But Hector is naive, blind to the schemes swirling around him. He will be used. Isaac, however, is steel. Loyal to Dracula with unshakable devotion, he sees his master not as a lord, but as a savior. For Isaac, humanity is a plague. He has felt its lash, its cruelty, and he has found purity only in Dracula's vision. Unlike Hector, Isaac does not waver. He does not question. His loyalty is absolute. And yet, the contrast between them foreshadows what's to come. Hector's softness makes him vulnerable, while Isaac's severity makes him unbreakable. The divergence of their paths begins here, on the battlefield of choice and conviction. Meanwhile, Trevor and Sypha grow closer. What began as necessity, three strangers united by a common enemy begins to soften into camaraderie, and then something deeper. Their banter sharpens, their trust builds. In the ruins of a dead family's legacy, love begins to stir quietly, cautiously, like a flame in the dark. The episode Broken Mast brings the first cracks of violence inside Dracula's camp. The unity of the War Council shatters further as Carmilla pushes her games forward. She whispers doubts into the ears of Hector. She tells him Dracula's war is madness, that the vampire lord no longer cares for victory, only destruction. She offers Hector purpose, an illusion of partnership, of being more than a tool. And Hector, yearning for recognition, begins to listen. The political games ripple outward. Trust becomes poison. Every alliance grows brittle. And though the war against humanity continues, the true war is already unfolding inside the castle itself. Yet even as treachery brews, the vulnerability of the vampires is exposed. For in this part of the tale, we are reminded, vampires are not gods. They can die. And when one of their number falls, it sends a shock through the illusion of immortality. The soldiers of night are powerful, yes, but they are not invincible. Their blood can be spilled, their bodies can be burned. And that truth is a blade that cuts in both directions. Hope for the humans, fear for the monsters. Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard, now armed with the secrets of the Belmont Hold, sharpen their resolve. But the weight of the conflict grows heavier. Dracula's castle, a looming specter that shifts across the countryside like a phantom fortress, draws ever closer to them. And with it, the promise of confrontation. The stage at the end of Broken Mast is one of an inevitable collision. Dracula grows more isolated, retreating into his grief, his command less certain by the day. Carmilla strengthens her position, plotting a betrayal that could topple him. Hector stands on the edge of manipulation. Isaac hardens his loyalty, and the generals fracture under the strain of doubt. And in the quiet corridors of the Belmont Hold, a bond deepens between Trevor and Sypha, fragile but unyielding. Amidst death and betrayal, something human survives, something worth fighting for. As the river of blood flows ever stronger, both sides prepare. For soon, the night will not only consume villages, it will consume itself. The war for the soul of Wallachia does not explode in blood and fire immediately. Instead, it simmers, it festers. The tension inside Dracula's castle becomes unbearable, the silence of halls echoing with distrust and betrayal. And as this storm brews, the other half of our tale plunges into discovering ancient magic, ancestral secrets, and the flicker of hope for humanity. In Last Spell, the story pulls us into the very heart of the Belmont Hold. Beneath stone walls and crumbling staircases lies not just a collection of weapons, but an encyclopedia of human resistance. Tomes stacked high, artifacts glowing faintly with forgotten enchantments, scrolls inked in blood and fire. It is here that Sypha shines brightest. She pores over the writings of the Belmont family with the hunger of a scholar and the excitement of a child opening a treasure chest. Her mind dances across pages, connecting spells, rituals, and histories that had been buried in dust. The Hold is a vault, yes, but to Sypha, it is also a library of living knowledge. Trevor, less scholarly but equally determined, arms himself. He knows that words and theories will not be enough. Steel must meet flesh, whips must strike bone. In the armories of his ancestors, he finds weapons of exquisite craftsmanship, daggers inscribed with runes, crossbows engineered for precision, vials of alchemical fire. Among them, of course, lies the vampire killer whip, the symbol of Belmont defiance passed down from hunter to hunter. Alucard, though not of Belmont blood, feels the weight of their history pressing upon him. He runs his hands along shelves, studies the weapons, and sees in them not just tools, but the evidence of a family's eternal defiance against his own kind. To him, the Hold is both inspiring and haunting, for every artifact screams of centuries spent fighting the very creatures from which he was born. Meanwhile, within Dracula's castle, the inevitable finally breaks. The War Council collapses into open hostility. Carmilla's whispers become open accusations. She confronts Dracula's leadership, daring to question his sanity. To many, it is blasphemy. To others, it is truth. She claims Dracula has no strategy, that he allows the war to stagger forward without direction, burning villages for nothing, wasting time and forces. But her accusations are not meant to save the war. They are meant to fracture it. She maneuvers with elegance, planting doubt in Hector, prodding him with promises of purpose and partnership. The young forge master, vulnerable and eager to belong, begins to believe her. And with Hector swaying, Carmilla's plan edges closer to fruition. For Carmilla does not merely want Dracula deposed. She wants to control the future. She envisions a vampire empire ruled not by grief or vengeance, but by her iron will. And to seize that future, she needs pawns. Hector is her first. The council, once a symbol of Dracula's absolute power, is now a battlefield of suspicion. Swords are drawn, words become daggers, and the unity of the vampire generals dissolves into chaos. Dracula, for all his power, does nothing to stop it. He remains in his chambers, isolated, sinking deeper into despair. His war, once a storm of vengeance, is now drifting into ruin not by the hands of humans, but by the betrayal of his own. Back at the Belmont Hold, the discovery of knowledge culminates in revelation. Sypha finds the key to moving Dracula's castle. She unravels the secret of its shifting nature, the spell that allows it to teleport across the land. With that knowledge, our heroes realize the impossible is within reach. If they can take control of the castle as mechanisms, they can bring it down. This is the last spell, the one chance to turn Dracula's greatest weapon into his greatest vulnerability. For centuries, the castle has been untouchable, a phantom fortress raining death on any who opposed it. But now, with the combined knowledge of Belmont and Speaker, human and Dampier, there is a chance. A narrow one, but real. Hope blossoms in the darkness. Yet hope, as always, is fragile. In the river, the war against humanity surges forward again. Another city stands on the brink of annihilation. The castle shifts, appearing like a nightmare on the horizon, blotting out the sky. Inside, Hector and Isaac struggle along their divergent paths. Hector, under Carmilla's manipulation, finds himself entangled in schemes he does not fully understand. He wanted only to serve a master who would cleanse the corruption of mankind. Now, he's dragged into plots that reek of ambition and betrayal. His naivety becomes his undoing as Carmilla plays him like a harp. Isaac, however, remains unbroken. His devotion to Dracula is absolute, and it is here that we begin to see the depth of that loyalty. Isaac believes in Dracula, not simply as a king, but as the one being who spared him from a cruel world. To Isaac, Dracula is salvation, and in that conviction, he becomes dangerous. But even Isaac cannot deny what is happening. Dracula himself begins to falter. Once, he strode the halls of his castle with the presence of a god. Now, he sits alone, distant, disengaged. The fire of vengeance that once fueled him is smoldering, turning inward. He has begun to doubt, not his hatred of mankind, but the very point of his crusade. And then, betrayal strikes from within. The very hand he once trusted turns against him. Carmilla makes her move, dragging Hector into her schemes, staging attacks, and orchestrating chaos that threatens to topple Dracula's reign from the inside. The vampires begin to fight each other as much as they fight humanity. The mighty empire of night is eating itself alive. As Dracula's forces tear themselves apart, the city by the river stands on the edge of destruction. Innocent lives hang in the balance. And though Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard are far from the battlefield, preparing in secret, the consequences of this battle echo toward them. The fate of Wallachia is not only a matter of swords and spells, it is a matter of choices. Hector choosing naivety over wisdom, Isaac choosing loyalty over doubt, Carmilla choosing ambition over unity, and Dracula choosing grief over purpose. The river runs red, not only with the blood of humans, but with the betrayal of vampires. And as the waters rise, the war shifts. For now, it is no longer only humanity fighting for survival, it is Dracula himself, struggling to survive the treachery within his own court. By the end of episode 6, the stage is ready for fire and fury. The heroes now hold the key to Dracula's downfall, armed with knowledge and resolve. The vampires stand divided, Carmilla's schemes boiling to the surface, Dracula's reign crumbling, Hector ensnared, Isaac hardened, and humanity caught in the flood. The river flows onward, and in its currents, destinies collide. The war that began with whispers and shadows now erupts into fire and steel. The lines are drawn, the betrayals are set, and destiny comes to collect its debt. For love, the penultimate episode delivers what the season has been building toward. A clash not of armies, but of souls. Carmilla makes her grand move. Having ensnared Hector in her schemes, she seeks to pull Dracula's castle into her grasp. Her plan is not merely betrayal, it is conquest. She manipulates Hector into moving troops under the guise of strategy, but in truth, she's luring them into a trap. She intends to isolate Dracula, to weaken him, and to seize control of his forces. Hector, blinded by her calculated kindness and promises of partnership, follows along. He cannot see that he is merely a pawn, a tool to be discarded once his usefulness runs dry. Where Isaac's loyalty is forged in iron, Hector's is malleable clay, easily molded, easily broken. Dracula himself remains detached, almost ghost-like. He drifts through his castle, a king without a throne, a father without a family, a man without a future. His grief consumes him so completely that even as his empire fractures, he does little to stop it. The war, once his passion, now feels like an echo. What meaning is there in extermination when the world itself already feels hollow without Lisa? But the flames of betrayal blaze on, regardless of his despair. Carmilla launches her coup. Chaos erupts inside the castle walls. Vampires turn on one another, blades clash, blood sprays. What was meant to be the Council of Night has devolved into a civil war. Dracula, the lord of all vampires, finds his authority crumbling before his very eyes. And then our heroes strike. Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard, armed with the secrets of the Belmont Hold, channel their knowledge and their courage into action. They target the heart of Dracula's fortress. Sypha bends the very fabric of magic, manipulating the teleportation spell that keeps the castle shifting across the land. She wrestles with its currents, fighting against centuries of enchantment. The strain is immense, but her will is stronger. In a brilliant moment of triumph, she seizes control. The castle shudders, reality twists, and with a crack like thunder, it is yanked violently through space ripped from the battlefield Carmilla sought to command and deposited instead directly before the Belmont estate. Now the stage is perfect. The War of Shadows collapses into a single, final confrontation. Heroes and villains alike are drawn into this one place. The Belmont Hold, symbol of human resistance, stands face to face with Dracula's fortress, symbol of vampire supremacy. The battle explodes. Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard storm the castle, cutting through hordes of night creatures. Trevor's whip cracks, tearing demons apart with precision. Sypha unleashes fire and ice in sweeping arcs, her magic a storm of elemental fury. Alucard wields both sword and vampiric power, cutting a path through the chaos with grace and ferocity. Together, they carve their way to the heart of the fortress. And there, waiting, is Dracula. The confrontation is not immediate bloodshed. Instead, there is silence. Father and son, standing across from one another. Alucard's eyes burn with determination, but behind it, sorrow. Dracula gazes upon him not with hatred, but with the weight of a man who knows this moment was inevitable. The battle begins, and it is unlike anything seen before. Dracula's power is immense, overwhelming, the fury of centuries unleashed in every blow. He moves like a storm, striking with fire, shadow, and brute strength. Trevor and Sypha fight valiantly, their teamwork honed, but even together they struggle to withstand the might of the vampire lord. It is Alucard, though, who bears the heaviest burden. Blow after blow, he meets his father's wrath, his blade clashing with Dracula's fury. Their battle rages through the halls of the castle, tearing stone apart, shaking foundations. Trevor and Sypha join in, striking when they can, but the heart of this conflict is father and son. And then, the fight reaches Lisa's room, the chamber where Alucard's mother once lived, the place where her memory lingers, untouched by time. Dracula halts, struck not by blade, but by grief. He sees not his enemies, but the child he raised, standing in the room of the woman they both loved. In that moment, the monster fades. The grief that had twisted him into a demon collapses under the weight of love remembered. He whispers, broken, that he cannot kill his own son. For the first time in the season, Dracula is not a lord of darkness, but a father, and that is what destroys him. Alucard, with sorrow, drives the final blow. Dracula falls, not cursing humanity, not raging against his killers, but mourning his wife. His last words are not of vengeance, they are of Lisa. And then silence. Dracula, Lord of Vampires, is gone. The war ends not with triumph, but with tragedy. For Alucard, it is a hollow victory. He has slain his father, but in doing so, he has lost him forever. Trevor and Sypha, weary but alive, understand the weight of his grief. In that moment, the trio is bound not only by battle, but by shared loss. And so begins End Times, the final chapter of Season 2. The dead are buried, both literally and figuratively. Carmilla, though her schemes nearly succeeded, flees into the night, her ambitions intact, her threat far from extinguished. Hector, betrayed by the very woman he trusted, is dragged away, a captive in chains. His loyalty, his naivety, has cost him everything. His future now lies in Carmilla's hands. Isaac, loyal to the end, survives by Dracula's grace. In the final hours, Dracula spares him, casting him into the desert with magic, away from the carnage, alone but alive. Isaac, unlike Hector, carries no regret. His devotion remains pure, and in his heart, a seed is planted. The war for Dracula's vision may not be over. As for Trevor and Sypha, their bond blossoms into something undeniable. In the ashes of battle, love blooms. They have fought together, suffered together, and now they begin to dream of a life together. Sypha, who once wandered as a speaker without ties, finds in Trevor not just a companion in battle, but a partner in spirit. Trevor, hardened by cynicism, finally allows himself a glimmer of joy. But Alucard remains, alone. The castle collapses, its power undone, but the Belmont Hold remains standing. Alucard chooses to stay behind, to guard both legacies, the knowledge of the Belmonts and the ruins of Dracula's empire. He cannot walk away. It is both his penance and his purpose. Alone in the shadows, he takes on the burden of history. The season closes not with fanfare, but with bittersweet silence. Heroes survive, villains scatter, and the world breathes again. But beneath the calm lies the truth. Grief, betrayal, and love have rewritten the balance of power. Dracula is gone, but his shadow lingers in the hearts of those who loved him, those who betrayed him, and those who would carry on his dream. The end times of one era have arrived, and from them, a new beginning stirs uncertain, fragile, and dangerous. But this is only the beginning. Stay tuned, because Season 3 will plunge even deeper into the shadows.